You pull off the interstate at 1 in the morning because your eyes are heavy and the next town looks like a promise of a bed. The neon sign is half broken, the parking lot is nearly empty, and the office light is the only warm thing against a wet highway sky. That's the kind of place where you tell yourself you'll sleep for a few hours and be on the road before sunrise. You do not expect to feel watched through drywall. I was driving from New York to Tennessee. It was supposed to be a long, boring stretch of highway, the kind you do to get somewhere meaningful, a job interview, a family visit, the kind of thing you can only reach if you sit in a car until the horizon moves. Around 1 a.m., exhausted and craving a shower, I pulled into a 2-story motel in Virginia. The clerk was an older man who moved slowly behind the counter and handed me a key without much small talk. The room smelled like stale coffee and motel cleaner. I chose the far room on the top floor because it felt quieter, farther from the parking lot. The walls were paper-thin. At first it was background noise, muffled footfalls, the kind of nightly bustle you expect when people shuffle to the vending machine. Then I heard it. A raised voice and a reply, the cadence of an argument. There's a particular way raised tones cut through silence at night. They feel bigger than they should. For a few minutes I listened, thinking it was a couple in the room next door. The anger moved back and forth like a tennis match. Then the voices changed in a way that made my skin prickle. One voice would speak, then a distinctly different voice would answer within the same room. They were both male. The timbre, the pitch, it was like listening to 2 characters in a radio play. At first I convinced myself 2 people were in there. Except the timing was too precise. The replies came faster than someone could leave and re-enter a space. And then one of the voices dropped low and said something that made me realize it wasn't 2 people at all. It was one man doing both parts, alternating between tones like an actor switching masks. My hands went cold. I could hear pacing now. Slow steps, then the click of hard-soled shoes on the hallway tile. A soft knock at my wall. A voice, muffled but clear enough in the dead hour, sounded almost conversational. I hear you in there. That phrase, so casual, so impossible to misinterpret when it's pressed against the cheap drywall, felt like a command. I froze against the covers and tried to measure options in my head, ridiculous and practical. The door was locked. The deadbolt looked flimsy. I considered calling the front desk. I considered staying perfectly still and pretending not to notice. Instead, I left the room and went down to the lobby. The older man at the desk acknowledged me with an automatic nod, as if he'd seen every possible late-night problem before. I told him about the voice, how one man seemed to be doing both parts and how he had approached my door and said, "I hear you in there." His face didn't register panic. He led me back upstairs without a word and opened a downstairs room for me. "Ground floor closer to the office," he said. His voice had the practiced calm of someone who manages other people's discomfort nightly. He apologized without dramatics and handed me a new key. I moved. The hallway smelled the same, but being closer to the office felt safer. I locked the door. I double-checked the chain. I lay down and tried to sleep, telling myself it had been a weird, performative, drunk weirdo, a story to tell friends later. That's how the mind protects itself, by normalizing the abnormal. Then, around 3 in the morning, I woke to the sound of someone walking outside. Not passing through the lot, outside my room, on the walkway beneath my window. I pulled aside the blinds without thinking. A face was there, flat against the glass, close enough to see breath fogging the pane. The man smiled. It was not a full greeting smile. It was the soft, practiced sort of smile people use when they want to seem harmless. He tapped the glass. He pressed his forehead to it, and for a moment all I could think was how small the pane of glass felt between me and him. I called down. The clerk answered as if this was an ordinary late-night incident. He came to the door. The man stepped back and walked off toward the rear of the building. He didn't run. He didn't hurry. He paced around the parking area like someone waiting for a cue. I didn't sleep again. At first light I packed my things in motion blur, shoes, wallet, the little plastic bag with travel-sized toiletries, and left without asking questions. The sun felt obscene and bright compared to the night. I drove away with the engine noise filling the hollow place in my chest. Months later, I can still feel the vibration of that soft smile pressed to glass. I never stayed at a roadside motel like that again. If this story is hitting a chord with you, and you want more real motel horror stories, stick around. There are 2 more I can't shake. The next one happened when I was younger. I was a college freshman then, crammed into the back seat with my 2 younger sisters, our stepmom in the front, and my grandmother clutching a small bag on her lap. We were driving toward Branson for a spring break trip and decided to cut through Oklahoma to save an extra 2 hours. It was evening, about 8, when we pulled into a low-slung motel to rest for the night, the kind of place with a fluorescent lobby and a jar of mismatched keys behind the counter. We unloaded the car, laughed about the cheap pizza we were going to get from the truck stop across the street, and I remember the sound of my sister repeating the room number aloud as she and our stepmom stood in the lobby. Saying it out loud was a dumb little habit, a way to make sure everybody knew where to go. There was a man in the lobby. He was in black from head to toe and sat hunched in a shadowy corner, not looking like he was waiting for anyone in particular. He watched without overt movement, like a statue with its head cocked toward the room numbers we spoke. He didn't approach. He didn't do anything at the time that felt obviously threatening. But when you're traveling in a group, certain things lodge under your skin. Someone listening a little too intently, someone who seems to take interest in the details you casually offer. We took separate rooms. My sisters, grandma, and stepmom had adjacent doors. I remember carrying the pizza back, the grease-slick box warm in my arms, and thinking of how normal it all felt. Suburban girls on break, cheap food, TV turned low. Later that night, my stepmom went to open her door and almost screamed. She came back into our room like a wind had knocked the air out of her. "There's a man standing against the wall right by my door," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the fear in it made us all listen harder. She said he was pressed there, like he was trying to become part of the architecture of the hallway, silent, completely still. Before we could do much, the man turned and walked into the room that separated our 2 doors. He didn't knock, he didn't speak. He simply crossed the threshold and stood inside, in the thin corridor between our rooms. The way he moved had no urgency, but his presence felt absolute. My grandma sat down on the edge of the bed and prayed out loud. My sisters grabbed their phones, but there was no cell signal worth anything in that strip of town. We ran down to the front desk as a group. The woman behind the counter was young and acted like she took an immediate threat seriously. She refunded our money without question, but we were already in the parking lot when it happened. A second man I hadn't noticed earlier was trying door handles along our car line, and a third figure appeared under the yellow light of a lamppost a few cars down. I saw their shadows move with the same slow deliberation I had seen in the lobby. The man at our separating door came out and walked toward the lot. We piled into the car, keys fumbled, breaths loud, and the engine roared to life like a relief valve. 3 men started walking toward us. I remember watching them approach through the rearview mirror, their pace unhurried, like a small group heading to a corner store. The parking lot was wide and mostly empty. They were purposeful, but not sprinting. Fear is an odd clarifier. It eliminated ambiguity and left only the instinct to leave. We did not argue. We did not turn on lights to create spectacle. We went. We drove away in a messy convoy of 3 cars, my stepmom driving, me in the back seat trying to keep my grandmother calm, my sisters weeping in the back. We did not stop until we found another motel an hour down the road. The manager there took one look at our faces and offered a room with a heavy iron door that didn't talk back to the night. There were roaches in the bathroom, and the sheets smelled like smoke. But we were grateful in a way that made me feel ashamed for acknowledging it. We sat with cheap coffee and braced ourselves in the fluorescent hum of safety. That night I learned how fast a group's dynamics can change when a threat arrives. My stepmom became fierce. My grandmother found a calm center. My sisters clung to each other like life rafts. We argued later about whether we should have confronted the men, whether we should have called the police sooner. In the moment, there was no time for debate, just action. We were lucky. We left. We kept telling the story for months, because it was the sort of thing that rewires your sense of ordinary trust. A few months after that, on a drive down to Florida with my girlfriend Julie, something happened that lodged like a pebble in my shoe. Small, persistent. Always there when I shifted my weight. We were halfway through an overnight run to Florida, and stopped at a small motel around midnight because our phone chargers could not reach the console and the GPS had decided we were on a detour. We got a ground floor window room, room 5. It felt convenient. I liked being close to the car. At some point I left the door cracked to pop out and grab the charger from the trunk, thinking Julie would just watch something on her phone and the door would be safe. The lot was empty and quiet, the sky a heavy dome, and that small stream of air through the cracked door felt like a trustful. When I came back with the charger, a man was standing directly in front of our door. He was large and wore a trench coat that hung from his shoulders like he was playing at a character from a film noir. He wasn't moving toward the car. He wasn't fumbling in his pockets. He stood there with his back to the lot, staring at the door, and when he turned his head toward me, he smiled. Not a laugh, not a grin, just a slow, soft smile that didn't reach his eyes. I froze, the kind of immobility that makes your body fold inward. He didn't seem to register my presence. He stood there for a long time, and I went to the car and stood watching him from across the pavement, telling myself he was harmless, telling myself 1,000 rationalizations. 10 minutes passed. My phone battery read 20%. The man did not move. He stayed rooted before the door like a sentinel. When we went inside, we closed the deadbolt and sat on the edge of the bed with the lights dim, trying to decide if we should leave. Every small sound was amplified. The hum of the air conditioner, the whisper of traffic in the distance, the faint scrape of someone's shoes in the lot. Eventually I looked through the blinds and saw him again, now across the lot beneath a light, watching the window of our room as if he'd found a pastime. He remained, motionless, watched. I remember thinking about cameras. I remember thinking about the front desk. How many times have we all visited places that claim to monitor parking lots and then find out there are no cameras, or the cameras aren't working? In the morning we went to the office. A woman, owner or manager, took my account like a bartender taking a long complaint. Polite, practiced, a little distant. When I asked about a man standing at our door the night before, she shook her head slowly. "We only had you last night. No cameras in the lot," she said. Her expression didn't read as dismissive so much as it read as fact. She insisted there were no other guests. That answer sounded stranger than the man. If there was no record, how had he been there? We left immediately. We didn't linger for conversation or explanation. The uncertainty was worse than any assumed threat. What if there had been cameras? What if the front desk had acknowledged other guests? The lack of closure became its own brand of fear, the sense that someone had been inside your personal space, and the best you could take from it was the shadow of a face in the dark. Those 3 nights are a collection now, a small anthology of moments when ordinary travel turned into something that narrowed the world to a single wrong sound or a single stationary pair of eyes. I tell these stories because there's a similarity in them that is both obvious and chilling. The seemingly mundane choices we make, top-floor room, quiet lobby, cracked door, can put you exactly where someone else chooses to be, whether that someone intends harm or is merely acting in a way that deeply unsettles you. If there's any practical takeaway I can give without promising invulnerability, it's this: trust the tiny alarms in your body. If something feels off, do not feel foolish for acting on that feeling. Park as close to the office as possible when you check in. Keep your car in sight if you can. Don't announce your room number loudly in public spaces. If a person or behavior catches your attention, tell the clerk, firmly, plainly, and ask for a room change or request someone come to your door. If you're with a group, move together to a public place like a 24-hour diner or a well-lit gas station while you sort your next step. And if you ever feel directly threatened, call local authorities immediately. Leave the details to them. None of these tips are guarantees. There are no guaranteed safety formulas, but small precautions buy time. And time is the thing you need when your heart is pounding and your thoughts are scrambled. What stays with me most, months and years after each of those nights, is not just the fear itself but the quiet that follows. The way ordinary sound returns to its place. How traffic noise can suddenly feel obtrusively comforting. How the memory of a man smiling softly at a window can keep you awake even when you are safe. You learn to read the borderline between normal and wrong in a new key. You carry it like a scar you can't see but feel every time you open a motel room door. If you've ever had a motel encounter that left you rattled, share it in the comments. Hearing other people's stories helps us recognize patterns and maybe in a small way prepare others for similar moments. If you want more true motel horror stories like these, subscribe for more accounts from people who made it out and lived to tell the tale. Stay aware out there. Keep your keys within reach and listen to the voice inside that says, "This feels wrong." It might just be the thing that makes you leave in time.